All right, call this meeting to order. This Hsd School Board regular meeting Tuesday, September 27th, 2022 at approximately 7:02 p.m. Melissa, would you mind taking the roll call?
Sure. Carl Hubner.
Here.
Jason Giard.
Here.
David Smith.
Here.
Megan Malcolm. Here. Erin Pellegrini. Here. And Pinkerton Student Liaison Shannon Caffell.
Here.
Thank you. And also seated at the board table is Superintendent of Schools Bob Thompson.
All right, thank you, Melissa. We'll go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Erin, you want to lead us in the pledge? Thank you.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, Erin. Board members, if you want to take a look in your packet, you do have meeting minutes for your approval from September 13th, regular meeting minutes, and the September 13th working meeting minutes.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes and the working meeting minutes from September 13th, 2022.
Seconded by Ms. Pellegrini. Any discussion, questions? All right, all approved, please raise your hand. All right, all approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Melissa, do we have any public comment?
No, we don't tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, we are going to turn our attention to school highlights, starting with Dr. Cheney on HCS.
I checked this time. Thank you for having me. It's just been a couple of weeks since my last update, so I don't have a whole lot of new information for you. But one thing I did want to update you on is the enrollment. We continue to be right at or just under policy in all of our grade levels except for grade 2. You did raise the policy to allow us to put 21 students in a class. Starting next week, we'll have 2 classrooms that are at that 21 mark, and the rest of the classrooms will remain at 20. So no need to change anything there yet, but we are keeping our eye on that as well. Over the last couple of weeks, we have had a couple more bus hiccups, but this week, the last couple of days, we have seen a marked improvement, and buses have been clearing much closer to their regular time. So I'm hoping that we're on the right path. I'm pleased to let you know that Crystal Mancini, who was here last time, has been very responsive in working with us and making sure that things are taken care of. At HCS, though, we are so excited to bring back our student council this year. Mrs. Rodriguez is going to be the advisor for the program, and our 4th graders have just made their campaign posters, and as you walk down the hall, it's really sweet. I mean, they're blinking and all sorts of things. The kids have really had an opportunity to express their creativity. So elections will be happening at the end of this month, and we will start our student council for the 22-23 school year. We had students in Mrs. Remelard's 1st grade partner with Mrs. Morin's 4th grade last week to celebrate International Dot Day. And International Dot Day is a day based on the book The Dot by Peter Reynolds, which is a story about a teacher who really challenges their student to be brave enough to make their own mark in this world, starting with just a dot. So our 1st graders partnered with their 4th grade buddies to create unique pieces of art that they use to express themselves. We are looking forward to our first early release day tomorrow, September 28th. As a reminder, there will be no afternoon preschool on that day, and then half-day kindergarten times will be adjusted to fit the schedule. So we'll have morning K from 9 to 11 and afternoon K from noon to 2. So parents should expect that midday bus to be about a half an hour earlier than usual. And at the 2 o'clock dismissal, families should expect buses to be about 90 minutes earlier than usual. We're excited to bring back our volunteers at the Central School. I was actually in contact with a volunteer who's excited to bring back our We Deliver program, which is our internal mail system where children write letters to other kids throughout the building. So we're looking forward to bringing parents back and community members back to help our school. And finally, this evening, I just wanted to mention the facilities studies that we've been engaged in so far this fall. Most recently, last week, we had Primex, our risk management organization, come out and take a look at our playground. It hasn't been looked at in a little while, and so they came out to give us some feedback, and I'm looking forward to their report. Additionally, we had a walkthrough by the New Hampshire School Administrators Association, which will focus on the use of the facility, and the Department of Ed has been by as part of our request for building aid this spring. So, any questions this evening?
Questions? One quick question.
Sure.
I know they used to, a few years ago now, used to allow like either parents come in for lunch, that kind of stuff. Are we thinking about starting that back up as well?
So we're not going to do lunch buddies again, but we are looking at putting together a couple of programs, like maybe breakfast with a buddy to come in and do a meal, or some other interactive opportunities.
All right. And then there used to be something with like, I'm going to butcher the name, but it was like grandparents or something coming in as well. Are we going to return to that soon?
Yes, I'd like to be able to find some opportunities to invite like our grand buddies and things like that in. I think that focused on the book fairs and things like that. We're not ready to bring that quite back to the school yet due to we don't have a space to host a book fair.
Right.
But as we try to balance the needs and involve families, we are looking at those opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, now I'm delighted to introduce our new Pinkerton liaison, Shannon Caffell. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah,
Yes, nailed it.
that
All
one's
right.
always a tricky one. It's
Yes.
always hit or miss.
Always. Shannon comes from us. She's a junior Pinkerton, class of 2024, and we're excited to have you be part of the team here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I can't speak for everyone, but personally, I'm very excited to be back at Pinkerton this year. On August 31st and September 1st, students came to school by grade to meet with their teachers and walk through both day schedules. They also attended an assembly where they learned about what this year has in store for them.
You might want to pull the microphone a little bit closer.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. The freshman reception took place on Thursday, September 15th. This event allows students to mingle and enjoy the evening with their peers, along with getting to meet new people from different towns. It's a really fun event, and it's so nice to see all those new friendships forming. The annual senior corn roast took place on Saturday, September 17th. It was a great kickoff to the seniors' years, filled with fun games, delicious food, and a big bonfire. The week of September 15th through the 23rd was Spirit Week, leading up to Mac Plaque Weekend. All our sports teams played against Londonderry, once again bringing the plaque back to Pinkerton, 4-3 with one tied game. Friday, we had a pep rally to start off that weekend. It was fun to see what all the teams had been working on in their spare time and to see the bonds that they've all formed with each other. The club fair also happened that week during lunches, introducing students to new opportunities and ways to get involved in the school community. The sold-out homecoming dance took place in the Hackler Gym Saturday night, wrapping up the week and celebrating our big win. Underclassmen picture days were yesterday, September 26th, and today, September 27th. Mark Lawrence's photos are always amazing, and I can't wait to see them all. Tomorrow, Wednesday, September 27th, is also an early release day. Parents will have the opportunity to attend open house 1 to 3 or 5 to 7. This upcoming Thursday night is the Hall of Fame ceremony, where we will get to induct some of the most worthy faculty around. These people are recognized by peers and have represented Pinkerton's core values of courtesy, respect, and responsibility. This school year, we introduced Flex Period. It's 30 minutes between first and second classes, where students can sign up to meet with teachers for extra help or get whatever they need to get done. A new dress code was also introduced. It was created by a group of students to be more modern, inclusive, and allow students to dress more comfortably in order to get their schoolwork done. This month has already flown by, and it's crazy to think we're already a month into school. But if this is any indication on what this next year has to offer, I'm excited to see what it brings.
Thank you, Shannon. Any questions for Shannon? Yeah, thanks a lot. All right. We're going to move on to current business. And we've got a presentation from Student Services, Director of Student Services, Jessica Parsons.
Good evening, everyone.
That's okay.
So I'm Jessica Parsons. I'm the new Director of Student Services, and
Francine Flynn, Assistant Director.
we are excited to have this opportunity to present to you our entry plan, or our plan for the 2022-2023 school year. And so let's talk a little bit about what Student Services is. So Student Services focuses on making learning accessible for all students. Our goal is to ensure all, in capital, students get what they need to be successful. And so you can see there are quite a few bullet points under Student Services. And Francine and I want to take an opportunity to sort of define those and explain to you what those are and what those mean to the district in terms of Student Services. So the first, which is probably our largest area in which we service, right now we have 252 students identified requiring special education services. And that includes our students at Central School, Hsd Middle School, as well as the students that we service at Pinkerton as well. So in special education, we're charged with providing the oversight and implementation of federal and state laws to ensure that students get a free and appropriate education. And in New Hampshire, in order to qualify for special education services, you're eligible under two requirements. The first requirement is you need to meet criteria for one of 14 disability areas. That's the first criteria. You also have to meet a second criteria, which means that you require specially designed instruction. And those decisions happen as part of a referral process and an eligibility team meeting for special education. Sometimes students will be identified having a disability, but aren't identified requiring special education services. And that brings us to the second bullet point, which is Section 504. And so Section 504 is responsible for supporting students with disabilities, or, this is an important piece, characteristics of a disability that impact a daily life function. And so that requires us as a school district to support them and provide access to services or support so that they can access their education. Also within that, I'm just going to adjust this because I feel like I'm not speaking into it. Is that better? Can you hear me better? Okay. So prior to special education and potentially 504s is something that we are working on, and Nicole and I are going to present at some point in the next couple of months our presentation on multiple tiered systems of support. But federal and state laws have directed schools to focus on helping all children learn by addressing problems earlier within the general education system. And so we know if we can provide interventions early and often, that oftentimes we may mitigate the need for special education or 504 services. And that really is the responsibility of the district, to really create a robust system of tiered supports to support students. And so that also includes us being able to identify earlier if there is a requirement for a student to be referred for special education or Section 504. And these laws really promote the importance of high quality, effective interventions, and a process of providing interventions to students who are at risk for not only academic challenges, but also social, emotional, or behavioral challenges. And this whole system, which we're working really hard to develop as a district, is called the multiple tiered systems of support. You'll also hear us reference it, because we love acronyms, as MTSS. I'm going to have Francine talk to you about our next two bullet points.
Look, students who require a level of service that is not otherwise available in our school district are placed out of district in specialized programs and schools where their needs are met outside of the district. And we have students who meet this criteria. And there are also students who are parentally placed in local public charter schools. And we are also required to provide special education services per their IEP for those students as well. Another group of students are those who are either home or hospital bound due to medical reasons, who continue to require educational services. They can't access them in person. And so we are also responsible for ensuring that those, the educational needs of those students are met as well.
The next category in which we support are English language learners. And so our district is obligated to provide services for students who qualify as English language learners, and that qualification process happens two ways. We are required as a district to provide a home language survey upon registration into our district, and families will identify whether or not English is a first language or a second language. And then from there, triggers us to screen those students to determine whether or not they qualify for English language learner services. And that's all mandated through state and federal government. And we have policies and practices that we have to follow if families do notify us that they are speakers or English language learners. The next area that we support is health services or nursing services in both buildings. Counseling services, and that includes school counselors, our district social worker, and our school psychologist. We also support and offer specialized transportation, and it's provided to students who require an alternative to regular transportation. And there's a variety of reasons why a student may qualify or require specialized transportation, and we work with families to set that up, as well as the transportation companies that we can use that may provide alternative options, such if someone needs accessibility due to a wheelchair, we can work with our transportation companies to get transport that offers that accessibility. Lastly, falling under student services is McKinney-Vento, or what I like to sort of deem families in transition, also known previously as homeless families. I think families in transition is a nicer term to kind of qualify that under. But the McKinney-Vento Act defines homeless children and youth as individuals who lack a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. And this also includes children or youth who are sharing housing of other people due to the loss of housing or economic hardship. And I just want to give you an example of that. We may have a family who resides here in Hampstead and they lose their housing, and they may move or double up with a family who's in a surrounding town. Once we've identified that family, we work with them to determine whether or not it's in this child's best interest to continue attending our Hampstead school system. And if that is the case, we work with that family to procure transportation. And then what we also do is reach out to the town in which that family is currently residing in, and we could potentially cost share transportation, but it allows continuity of education for that remaining of that school year, so we can ensure that that child doesn't have any breaks in their education. So before I move on, do you have any questions about those areas in which student services cover? Okay.
I guess I had one quick question. You said before there's 252 that fall under the first one, or is it 252 amongst all of this?
Nope. Just for students that have been eligible for special education services.
Okay.
Pre-K.
Pre-K through 12, right?
Yep.
So that's about 20% of our population then,
You are correct.
right? Okay.
The state average right now is averaging between 16 and 17%. So it's clear we're over that. And one of the things we talked about at our H-team sort of retreat is that I don't think we have to really focus as much on the number, but I think what that tells us is we really need to continue to focus on our multiple tiered systems of support, right? Because we know if we can get them early, often, and within the general education setting, we may not require them to need the special education services. So we're really working hard to, and I'm going to talk about it in another slide, but we're really working hard with both buildings to really create a more robust approach to providing interventions for students, so that it may reduce the amount of students who actually require special education services.
All right. Could you give a rough number of, if we look at this, special education, 504s, out of district, How many students would you say in
Fall under
Hampstead?
all of these bullet points?
Not all of these,
Oh, okay.
because some of these, I'm thinking more of the ones that we think about coming around for budgeting and about how we make sure we can provide the services. Just out of curiosity, how many students is that we're servicing? If you look at special education, 504s, out of district, and ELL. If you don't have the number, that's fine. I'm just looking rough. Is it 300, 350? Sorry to put you on the spot.
So I'm going to give you an approximation guesstimate, but I will get back to you with a final answer, and we'll see if they're
How
close.
close?
How's that? Right? We'll
All
do
right.
that. I'm going to say that we probably have close to 350 students that fall within 504 in special education, out of district and charter.
Okay.
Yeah, with all of those. Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah. So I'll get back to you with that official number, but I'm gonna guesstimate somewhere around 350.
All right. Thank you.
You're
Appreciate that.
welcome. So since July 1st, I've had an amazing opportunity to meet with staff in both buildings, to meet with the staff, the leadership team, H team, as well as countless hours with Francine Flynn, who is has been an amazing resource in terms of understanding all the inner workings of the special education department and student services department for Hampstead. And so over the last 2.5 months, Francine and I have worked to create priorities over the next year that we think will help us improve our programming and improve access to education for our students. So priority number 1 is to assess internal special education practices and procedures to ensure state and federal compliance. That's really important because at any time the state could come in and they could, for lack of a better term, audit our practices. And we want to ensure that we have, to the best of our ability, we're in compliance with what those regulations are so that we're ensuring students have access to FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education. The second priority is in collaboration with district leadership, develop a robust academic, social, emotional, and behavioral multi-tiered system of supports for students. The third priority is for us to examine the current service delivery model and develop a flexible program planning approach to supporting students and providing services. And if you know, in number 3, last year, there was a program review that was done in collaboration with Kevin Murphy. And one of the areas that got brought up was looking at flexible programming models versus having standardized programs where kids sort of had to fit into. This approach, looking at current service delivery models and creating a flexible program planning is a priority for us. And we'll talk more about what that looks like and how we're going to move forward with that priority. Priority number 4 is to review and evaluate the district's financial and human resources to ensure maximum efficiency. And then the last is to examine 504, English language learners, counseling, health services, and McKinney-Vento programming. So let's talk about priority number 1. So the first priority, like I said, is to assess the internal special education practices and procedures. The first thing we need to do is we need to review and update all special education forms to ensure state and federal compliance. Over time, what can happen is that silos can happen in buildings. And so to ensure that there is a central location that houses all of the forms that have then been vetted and deemed compliant under both federal and state regulations. And so Ms. Flynn and I are working right now at reviewing all of the current forms that Hampstead uses, and they look different in each building because, like I said, over time silos can happen, changes may happen, not everybody is given access to those new forms. And so we're really looking at the current forms. And then working with our department teams in each building to review what those forms are, what meets criteria, and then developing a shared folder, which is where they would access the compliant forms. And so We hope to have this all finalized, obviously before January, but as we're training people on the usage of these forms, we just want to make sure we're giving enough time that everybody knows how to appropriately use those forms. So we're going to say the completion date is around January, and then our progress indicators are just notes from department meetings and just making sure that we have that folder full of forms for everybody to access, and all of the new staff also know why and how to access those forms. Along with that is training our special education staff and building administrators on state and federal special education policies and procedures. So resources needed are DOE trainings. I am happy to announce that we just completed the LEA training for all of our administrators today, this afternoon. So both building administrators from both central school and the middle school completed the LEA training and were provided certificates today. So they are certified LEAs, which basically just means that they have had training in all of the laws in order to be able to chair the special education meetings. And then Francine and I are going to continue to work in our department meetings to train our staff on the use of the new forms, and then all of the reasons why we need to use those forms, and then basically just what are the appropriate process and procedures for IEP meetings, eligibility meetings, all of the sort of timeline process that needs to be done. And we want to do this in a couple of different ways. For our new staff, we're sending them to specific academies that address these. For some of our veteran staff, we're just using department meetings and department notes to do mini lessons, we like to call them, and then provide the appropriate material within department meeting notes that they can reflect on when they need to. And the goal by June of 2023 is that our entire department has been trained from beginning to end on New Hampshire special education policies and procedures. Any questions about priority number 1? Sorry, it's a little dry. No? Okay. Priority number 2.
I had one quick question.
Yeah.
The forms, are they all hard copy, or is that required, or can you do digital copies?
So great question. So right now there's a combination of both. Like I said, there were sort of silos in the building. So some buildings have electronic copies, some have just Word documents, not Google Docs that can be shared. And so there really is just a variety, and there are some just hard copies. Okay. Our goal is to make them all Google documents that can be shared in a folder so that everybody has access to those electronic documents. Now, it will really be up to a family in terms of how we share those documents. So if they are okay and they sign off on electronic distribution, then that's how we'll provide it, because some families have gone completely paperless, and that's okay, and we can provide access that way. There are other families who like to have paper copies of things, and so they'll be able to print those notes and those attendance and any of those documents that are required in a hard copy as well.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. We also have a new form that we're working to generate that will allow families to sign off on what they would like electronically and what they would like to have in hard copy, so that we have that in their file going forward, because that is a requirement by the DOE. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and yes, we also are required to keep a hard copy file on every student. So even if we use electronic documents, we would still print a copy of all of the meeting paperwork for the file, because we do have to keep a hard copy on file in case there is an on-site by the DOE. So priority number 2 is to develop a robust academic, social, emotional, and behavioral multi-tiered systems of support. And like I said before, this is required not only by our state government, but also by the federal government. And so the first thing, which we are almost complete with, is developing a district-wide multi-tiered systems of support team. And this is really going to be a collaboration between the building teams. So we're going to take representatives from the building MTSS teams to generate a district-wide team. That way the input is coming from both buildings, but we can create a district-wide process for how we're going to provide interventions and how we're going to put or have kids go through the system of supports. Although they'll be individualized to what a kiddo needs, I think it's important that we have common systems around how identification happens, what meetings are taking place, what types of interventions we're providing for kids. There needs to be some commonality around that. So when a kid does move up from one school to another, that there's common language and that we know if a student was provided that service, if we say it, then the middle school understands what happened and what those services were. Also, in terms of data and record keeping, having consistency around what that looks like for both buildings as well. So we're working really hard to create a team that's excited to work through and develop this process. And then in collaboration with building teams, we're going to identify and align existing resources because we know we already have really good things happening. We have really good reading interventions happening. We have good math interventions happening. We have good social and emotional interventions happening. It's around the system to get kids in there, using data to make sure that the right kids are getting the right services, and then that we're using that data also to drive really specific goals for students, and then tracking those goals to ensure that our system and our interventions are working. Because if the data is telling us it isn't, then we need to change potentially what we're providing for a kiddo to make sure that we're teaching them the way they need to learn it. And then lastly is just providing ongoing staff professional development opportunities related to MTSS. And so looking at how do we need to train our staff to ensure that we really are creating this robust tiered system of support. And again, it's not just academic related, it's also social, emotional, and behaviorally related. So it's that approach to the whole child. Any questions about priority number 2?
So obviously we don't have unlimited resources. How can, the RTI system, use RTI. If you can explain quickly what RTI is, and then just kind of explain how you figure out who you'll get the resources to and how you develop stuff over the school year.
Yeah. So, at the very, sort of basic level to explain it is currently students are actually, I think this week, they've been going through what we call iReady testing. That is just one data point that we use in identifying whether or not a student is requiring a response to an intervention. But we look at once students complete their iReady testing, we look and we kind of start from the bottom. Those kids sort of identified that are flagged in red. Are those kids already receiving services? Have they been identified requiring special education? Are they already sort of getting their needs met? And is there a reason why that they're in that red? That data still helps us drive some of our IEP services, but then there might be kids that are in the red that don't necessarily access services. And that's where you sort of start to say, okay, I'll just give a basic, their reading level is in the red, which is flagged to be below where we would like them to be in terms of our percentiles. And so those would be the students that we would want to provide intervention with first. And then you sort of go up the line around from sort of the lowest kind of up. And that's how you sort of delineate who requires the RTI services.
So you're constantly reassessing who needs it. So if you have one kid that starts to fall behind, you can identify them and lift them up. So it's not necessarily a core group of students, but you're adaptive over the school year.
Sure. And I think our goal, I know Nicole and I really want to create a plan that's pretty systematic in the sense of, like, if you were to read it, you knew exactly how a kid can go from taking, like, when the scheduled we call them universal screeners, iReady, we universally screened all students this week, taking that universal screening data schedule of when that's going to happen, when the data team meetings are going to happen to determine when interventions are going to happen, when the 6-week or 8-week cycle has been completed, and what happens next. So we really just want to have a really defined process in our district from pre-K all the way up to 8th grade so that it's really defined. Right now, we're doing a good job. We have RTI practices in place. I think it's just defining them and really creating a more robust process so that kids, that we just make sure there aren't any kids falling through the cracks. And that's really the important part for us, because that can happen sometimes. And then 5th grade or 6th grade comes, and then they're referring for special education, and that we could have been opportunities to catch them much earlier. And so really that is a big part of why you want to create a really robust MTSS process.
Absolutely. Thank you. That sounds awesome.
You're welcome.
I have one question.
Sure.
A few weeks ago, we heard here that, the district is going to UDL and, using that. How does that play into this?
Yeah, great question. So our hope is when we present on this multiple tiered systems of support, that they tier it into to 3 categories. And so the first category is tier 1, which would be general education setting. And so UDL is universal design for learning. And so that really is, it really is tasked with looking at the environment and your instructional practices to ensure that it's inclusive for all kids. And so when you go to design a lesson, you design it with thinking about all of the kids in mind and not just sort of that middle of the road kid. And so this is why UDL is so important to multiple tiered systems of support, because it really focuses on, in that general education classroom or in that tier 1 setting, we're designing our instruction to meet the needs of most of the learners. I would say hopefully you're gearing it towards 100% of the learners, but when we talk about it, more often than not, it's close to meeting 80% of the needs in the classroom. Does that make sense?
Yep. Does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You had mentioned that you're collaborating between the central school and the middle school so that it's an easy transition from one school to the next. Are we doing the same thing with Pinkerton and our 8th grade students so that they have a nice, easy transition into Pinkerton? And what does that look like?
Want to take that?
I know that for all students, they have activities that I know the school counselor, Bob Maya, who's the 8th grade counselor, works closely with the counseling department up at Pinkerton to take care of the course scheduling, all the course that they pick. Pinkerton staff come down here and they go through and they meet with every student and their activities. They have a day where they go up and they visit. So those are just general activities that happen for all students. But for students with educational disabilities, we have an 8th grade transition meeting that I facilitate, and it's at Pinkerton Academy. And the student comes with their parent and with their special education teacher and a general education teacher from Hampstead. We actually meet all at Pinkerton, and we go over their IEP, their services, their courses, and make sure all the services and things are in place for hopefully as smooth a transition as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And one of the other pieces we want to take a look at is currently right now, Pinkerton uses what's called habits of learning, which really talks about sort of those, I guess, habits that help you to become the best learner, and really looking at what those habits of learning are and sort of unpack them to ensure that we're building those sort of prerequisite skills for those students within our multiple tiered systems of support. So it's not there yet, but that is something we're going to look at as we're designing and developing our tiered system of support. Is, are we ensuring that those habits of learning are being fostered here at the middle school level and even down to the elementary school level, so that there is that nice continuity as they move through the schools. Okay, so priority number 3 is examine our current service delivery model and develop a flexible program planning approach to supporting students and providing services. And so in order to do this, we need to review our current and our projected service delivery model and needs for all students. And when I say current and projected, interestingly enough, an IEP can change mid-year, right? So it depends on when a child was identified for special education. And so we rewrite IEPs all throughout the year and sometimes into the summer. So we know what current services are needed based on where IEPs are right now, but we also need to look at what we're going to project for services for kids going into next school year. And so we're going to review all of those delivery needs. And really, it's really a longitudinal view from pre-K all the way to 8. Every grade level, what does the service delivery look like? It's not looking at each IEP. It's really outlining those on a grid so we can see who needs services outside the classroom for math, who needs services outside the classroom for reading, who needs services in the classroom reading. And then we can kind of look to see if we have patterns. And then from those patterns, we can develop schedules that best meet the needs of kids, and so that we are effectively and efficiently using our staff so that we're not. There are situations sometimes where we may schedule a kiddo who has a similar need, maybe similar goals in terms of reading, but because we haven't scheduled them appropriately, we can't service them at the same time. And so sometimes we end up having to service them individually when really it could be okay to service kids together. And so really looking at our service delivery model, our needs for students, and determining if we can program plan in advance. The other thing you want to start to look at too is cohorts of kids that have really specific needs, and could we program for those kids earlier and sooner, and or what will they need, or what will that look like in middle school? So if we start to look at needs now in a program planning sheet, we'll have all the needs from pre-K to 8 as kids move through the grade levels, we just continue to look at the view and we change the program planning grid based on what the current services are. So really trying to take a longitudinal view in order to program plan for the following year. So come May, we look at the sheet and we look at cohorts of kids. We look at, oh, this might make sense to have this group of case managers service these kids. And this is a group of kids who really require significant amount of reading services. That will also play into whether or not we need to budget for additional services for the coming year. So really looking at student services from a longitudinal view and being able to program plan based on that. And then adjust our service delivery every year, depending on that model. Any questions about that? Okay. Priority number 4, review and evaluate the district's financial and human resources to ensure maximum efficiency. So right now I'm still really trying to get a handle on our budget and where we're at in terms of making sure we're providing the services that students need. So we're reviewing and evaluating provisions of services with current staffing patterns and contracted providers. So there are times when we don't have staff hired in our district that can provide services for kids, and we may not need a full-time person. Physical therapy is a really good example of that. We have to contract for that, and we have minimal amount of services, so it doesn't make sense to not contract for that service and hire for somebody. So it makes sense to continue that. As we look at the program planning sheet and we start to see potentially an increase in services, there's a balance between, does it make sense to continue to contract, or does it make sense for us to go and add that as a provider in our district, because it's going to be more cost effective for us to own that person than it is to contract. And so continuing to review and evaluate our services and staffing patterns with contracted providers. And this is ongoing, obviously, through the budget process and obviously throughout the school year as well. We're also going to use resource analysis and data to make and develop fiscally responsible recommendations for next year's budget. So Francine and I are already looking at contractors that we use now, looking at how much their contract is, how many service delivery hours they're providing, and it doesn't make sense for us to continue with that contractor. Do we need to look for another contractor that may be less expensive, but we're looking to do that to be able to make proposals for the fiscal year 24. And then ongoing is reviewing and adjusting department finances as needed to ensure student services are met. So sometimes kids move in during the summer that we know may not have been budgeted for in October. Additionally, students' needs change from October till July 1st of when the new budget goes into effect. And so sometimes we'll have to look at, maybe a student moved out of district. I can work with Jeff. Do we need to shift money because that child is no longer there, but another student moved in and we need additional physical therapy services? So really just looking at finances and adjusting, looking at the monthly expenditure reports and adjusting accordingly so that we're ensuring that all services are met. Any questions about the finance and budget piece? Okay.
There we go. What about grants, outside funding? Where does that fall in here? Is that just not on this list, but it's just something that's your typical job?
So it is a typical job, and it certainly is a priority for me. I think really trying to expend all of the grant funding and activities for the previous grants prior to my start in July 1st. I have almost I've done my best to expend the finances that end, I think, Friday. Is it Friday the 30th? That grant I have to say, Lisa Gove in the finance department worked really hard to ensure that we were able to order materials, cut checks, and get those things delivered by a certain date so that we could use funding that had not been expended previous to July 1st. So there was quite a bit of money that may have been left on the table, but due to the work in the finance department, we were able to spend a lot of money from the grant that ends on the 30th of September. In addition to that, additional contracts that may not have been accounted for last October, we were able to put some of those reading contracted services into some grant funding to offset and not impact the district budget. So you're right. I spoke mostly about how it impacts our budget, but I am using grant funds to offset costs that may have come up that we weren't anticipating. So I'll continue to do that and use those grant funds. Additionally, grant funds are used for if a special educator realizes they need a different curriculum for a kiddo, or in OT. Some of the helmets broke over the summer for the kiddos to be able to use those trikes, and we want to make sure. So I was able to procure some grant funding to do that. So any unanticipated costs that come up that aren't significant, that's what we're using the grant funding for.
Okay, thank you, and please tell Lisa we appreciate her work too.
All right, priority number 5. And this is really looking at the other aspects of student services. So examining the 504, the English language learner, the counseling, the behavior, the nursing, and the McKinney-Vento services. So I've started to create vertical teams for our counselors, our board certified behavior analysts, and our nurses. And what that basically means is because there aren't a ton of counselors in a building, or our board certified behavior analysts or our nurses, allowing opportunities for them to get together once a month and have conversations about programming, their needs, even just clinical discussions around how they can support cases and students, allows for some really great discussion. It also allows us to look at program planning for future. And so creating vertical teams and allowing them opportunities to meet monthly to review those things. It also allows me an opportunity as I'm going to state trainings, or I'm going to state professional development, whether it's a new law comes down, something like that. It allows me an opportunity to meet with them, explain that, and make sure that they have what they need in order to implement whatever is coming down from the state. So we've already started those meetings, and they'll be ongoing throughout the year. And my hope is to continue that into the future as well. And then ensure the delivery of services for students identified with English language learners. We have identified some students that require the need, and so we're looking to fill a position to support those needs. And I will keep you posted on how that's going. And then lastly, ensure the district's registration process is consistent, meets state requirements, is accessible for all families. So what's interesting is when we register families, there are certain requirements, like taking a survey to identify whether or not English is your first or second language. In addition to that, there's a survey around, are you adequately housed? And so making sure that our registration process includes those forms, whether that's electronic or paper. We also want to make sure that it's accessible to all families that may not have access to technology and may need paper copies, families that may need someone to sit and help them fill out the forms because they require support with whether that would be filling out the forms, whether that would be reading the forms, in addition, whether it's in a language that's accessible to them as well. So really working with the director of technology to ensure that we have accessible registration so that families don't have barriers to enter into our district and access our educational programs. Any questions about priority number 5? All right. Are there any other questions we can answer for you? We already are. You're welcome.
Yeah, I think you kept it at a good level so people can understand it, so definitely helps. Appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else? All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we're going to turn this over to Mr. Thompson to give a school bus transportation update.
All right, thank you. So at the last school board meeting, we had representatives from First Student who came to talk about some of the challenges that we have faced as a district this year in terms of our student transportation. Namely, we have 9 regular education school buses and started the year with only 7 drivers. And that really is the result of a nationwide shortage of drivers in general, not just in student transportation, but across the country. So I was able to, we've been working very closely with First Student to try to mitigate some of the issues that we've been having. We do have a driver that has started, so now we are at 8 of 9 drivers. We have a driver that is finishing training, should be completed in the next 2 weeks. They'll come on board, and at that point, we'll be fully staffed. I think Dr. Cheney said it very appropriately. We still have hiccups. Even with the 8 out of the 9 drivers, every day there's a challenge with our student transportation. And some of it has to do not only with a lack of drivers, but some communication issues that we've been working with the bus company around, specifically around bus backup and the school being notified of bus backup in a timely manner so that we can notify parents. That's been a little bit of an ongoing challenge, but as Dr. Cheney indicated, there is a willingness on the part of First Student to work with us to try to solve these problems. So I would say that we are in a much better place than we were 2 weeks ago, but by no measure are we where we need to be. So this will be a topic that we'll revisit. I hope that at the next board meeting I have better news. I'd like to come here and say that we're fully staffed and we're running smoothly. So there's hope. I also did send out a communication to parents this morning, and I referenced the First View app. So there's a section on our website specifically for student transportation. And if you go there, there's information about the First View app. This is an app that allows you to track your child's bus. This will be very helpful for parents in planning, drop-off time in the afternoon or arrival to school. A couple things about First View app that parents should be aware of. One, this is just for students at the central school, at the middle school. It's not for students, unfortunately, at Pinkerton. And also, if your child is on a bus backup and taking a different bus, the First View app will not work. The tracker is in the bus, not on your child. So I think it's just important for parents to realize that. We had a little bit of a delay in rolling out the app because there's a unique 5-digit code, and we're having a difficult time getting that code to parents. That code is in your My School Bucks account. If for some reason you have an issue obtaining that code, you can reach out to the bus company. You can reach out to myself. We'd be happy to make sure. But parents are reporting to me that the app is very helpful. And I think we're heading in the right direction. And I look forward to future meetings where I can report even better progress.
Any questions, Mr. Thompson?
So there's a different system for buses that go to Pinkerton?
There is. Do you know, Mr. Dowd, not to put you on the spot, First View app is specific to?
It's not for Pinkerton students as of right now. I think we may have the capability, so I want to check and see if we can extend that capability over to Pinkerton as well.
If somebody wanted to know which bus was picking up their kid from Pinkerton, do they go to the Pinkerton website or is it off our website?
They can go to our website and under Departments and Transportation,
Okay.
they'll find routing information, and there's a Find Your Bus link, which takes you to EduLog. You put in your student's address and a bus stop or a couple pickups in the area may come up depending on your student's age and your location.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and that's an ideal time, scheduled time every day. That's not a real-time tracker.
I do believe that with the bus backup, that if parents know that there is support for bus backup, they can call and say, what bus is my child on? And that's backup.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Thompson?
In terms of transportation, I think that's it.
All right.
And Dr. Hubner, I just sent you the link to the bus information that you just
Thank you.
referenced.
All right. Next is for the HCS edition plan design discussion. Not a lot to update here. We were due to have a meeting today. We had moved that a couple days out due to schedule conflicts on the district side. So we'll be meeting on Thursday around, I think it's a noontime meeting. And we should have a pretty good update. That's what we're expecting from the architects and PMO, et cetera. With that, we will be expecting in October to start getting really busy with more communication to the community and ironing out some cost and what's in the designs I know that there's some ongoing facilities discussions, Ms. Thompson. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so Dr. Cheney, again, she mentions that the New Hampshire School Administrators Association is conducting an independent facility study. They're actually back on site tomorrow. They're going to come to both buildings. Again, the facility study is not specific to the central school addition, but the information from that will be very important in helping to guide some of the decisions we make, and more specifically coming up with possible contingency plans. So they'll be back on site tomorrow. They're going to be here to take some measurements. Again, the Department of Education did a site visit in August to assess our need for our application for building aid. That building aid would be approximately 30% of the project cost. We should have a sense in December of where we rank overall. Now, we have to be careful because just because we're ranked does not necessarily guarantee funding. So that's just something that we want to, at least it will give us a sense of the direction we may be going. I would also encourage folks at home, if you haven't seen, there was an excellent write-up in the Lawrence Eagle Tribune about the central school addition, some of the challenges that we've been facing. And there's even a photo in there from the Rock Room, which has actually garnered some level of controversy because I was told that, that is a experience for second grade students to be able to go and see the rock. So having it featured in the paper demystified a little bit of that experience. So I apologize to the parents that had reached out to me with that concern. It is duly noted. There'll be no future photos in the paper of the rock room.
Nice. All right. So while we had intended and wanted to have some more information, we will have a better update in October and start really progressing the communications to the community and a lot more activities going on. So unless anybody has any questions for us on that. All right. Next one is the 2022-2023 Hampton School Board Scholarship for Pinkerton seniors. So this one is just every year the school board allots funds for 2 Pinkerton seniors, typically one for a young gentleman and one for a young lady. And as you can see in your packets, board members, last year we did up that to $1,500 each. And this is a scholarship that is awarded by the Pinkerton Committee, Pinkerton Awards Committee. So, and they typically do that later on in the springtime, and then we usually have the winners come to a school board meeting. Melissa, can you correct me on this? Do we need to vote on this to allot the $1,500 again, or does that carry forward?
It does require a vote.
Okay.
Yes.
So board members, usually we vote to say, do we increase, do we keep it as is? Open to discussions and any motions from the board members. Okay. Thoughts? Dr. Hubner? Good. Aaron?
I'm okay with keeping it as is. If it went up, it would maybe only go up $100.
Okay. We're going to be looking for a motion from someone for something on this. You like that, Melissa?
That'd be nice.
I'll make a motion to keep the scholarship amounts for this year for $1,500 each.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? All right. So all approved for keeping at $1,500 for each? Raise your hand. All right, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, board members, you have in your packet the school board goals. Now, we had a working meeting just a couple weeks back that we went through and amended and looked at these. I would like to read through these. Maybe if we can each take one and read to the public, starting with Dr. Hubner, and then we can have discussions around this after. So if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Hubner, starting with facility improvements.
Facility improvements. To bring about facilities improvements in order to meet, at a minimum, current state and federal standards for educational institutions based on informed safety requirement recommendations substantiated by careful evaluations of facility reports and audits while educating the public about the need to secure funding for this purpose.
Mr. Giard, you want to take the next one?
Did you want to talk about them individually first, or?
We can talk about it individually if you want.
Your call.
Your call.
Let's talk about them individually.
All right. What do you think about facility improvements, Mr. Giard?
I like it. It keeps the focus on what we really need for our students. I like the fact that it is one of our goals because we can continue to educate the community on what is needed, what's going on. It should be a focus for us, not just until we get we pass the central school edition, but moving forward beyond that, making sure that our students have a great atmosphere to learn in should be something that we focus on, not just this year, but every year.
Yep, I agree. I like that we did include the facility reports and audits. For those in the public that don't know, like last year we got the Homeland Security audit and we made corrections immediately. We didn't wait. We looked at those and we agreed, and they pointed out things that we wouldn't have thought of. And then there's other things that they've alluded to that we've put into budget that are bigger than just the small things like changing a door, changing a window. So I do like this, that we included that, and especially with the reports that are kind of coming out, see what we can do to implement that for a better education for our students. Anyone else?
All right, the next goal, appreciation of diversity and inclusivity. To support a culture of acceptance, diversity, equality, and inclusivity by providing opportunities for professional development to staff that foster a variety of perspectives to ensure our schools are welcoming, respectful, and a safe learning environment.
So for me, I think this is the example of what we talked about today with student support services and the idea that we're committed to giving every student an opportunity to succeed and to be able to follow the pathway that they so choose in order to have awesome people like Shannon who go to Pinkerton and represent us well.
I agree. I think that having just the presentation tonight really spoke to this goal here and others like this that we've talked about, UDL, et cetera. So I think, fostering that environment where all kids can learn here is what we need to do. So, anyone else? All right. And I was very strategic in placing this, so I would have the shortest one. You like that? I'm going to have to clear my throat. A strategic plan, support the implementation of the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. Break. I think this one is one I'm excited about because it's something we've designed for ourselves this past year. We implement ourselves here for, amongst everyone. And it's a rolling plan. It's not something that's just collecting dust, as Mr. Thompson has said. And we saw it evident last board meeting. We're constantly reviewing this and putting it in place. So I definitely appreciate the work and the graphic design on it.
It is a beautiful document, both in appearance and ideas.
Any comments? All right, you want to take the budget? A little light. Oh.
The next goal is budget. Develop an executable 2023-2024 budget that effectively supports a culture of continued advancement, focusing on student academic requirements in a fiscally responsible manner.
Oh, because your mic is under your jacket. All right. Any discussion on that? All right. Aaron? Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. My gift to you.
Effective use of financial resources with attention to grant funding. To encourage procurement of federal, this is comma hard. Encourage procurement of federal, state, to ultimately mitigate a portion of healthcare revenue while addressing those educational challenges relating to the development and executable budget in the school district, supportive of continued advancement and focus on student academic requirements
So this is one that Melissa and I wordsmithed together a bit. We did modify this one based on our working meeting that we wanted to change this a bit. This is one I'd want board members to take a look at, make sure you're good with how we've reworded based on, there's a lot of inputs to this one last time we met. I'm definitely open to any inputs, criticisms, questions, comments.
I mean, having the emphasis on fiscal responsibility is always good.
Yeah.
And I think we are moving in the right direction, especially with the zero budgeting that Mr. Thompson has done and Mr. Dowd has done to get the most bang for our buck.
You can always ask Aaron to read this again if we need to,
I like it. It's a. I feel like it needs to open up or turn into something sometimes and also. Yeah, I think maybe it should be reworded a little. I don't know.
Yeah, you're definitely not on.
It's on.
Are you sure?
Hear that.
Don't, actually. Actually, I don't want to use this. That's why I have this. So I like it. I love the putting in a goal, something about being, attentive to grant funding. But I think it's a little bit of a mouthful. Like we need to rework that a little bit. I almost don't understand it because there's so much.
It takes a while to figure out what it's saying, but once you understand what it's saying.
Right.
Would you like to take a whack at rewording that one for us, Aaron?
Not right this second, right? Like I can come back to you.
Back in 5 minutes? No. Yeah, I think that if you'd like to take a pass at this, and we can bring this to the next board meeting. And
Okay. Yep.
how's that sound?
That sounds wonderful.
Strategically placed it so she was reading
Yeah.
it.
So that I'd have homework.
All right. Let's circle on back to Dr. Hubner. You want to do the next one?
Oh.
Innovative practices?
Innovative practices to support the district-wide implementation of innovative practices in universal design for learning by staff to promote intellectual, social, emotional, and physical well-being of all the students in the district. And I think this is encouraging our staff to take risks, to bring, have fun in learning, which is really important, and to keep that alive from the elementary school through the middle school. And then also the idea that we're educating the whole child, which when Mr. Thompson puts the chair in the room, I really appreciate that idea of we're not looking for academic test scores. That's a piece of it, but we're looking for, to have awesome, cool individuals that will come and sit at our board meetings.
Agree. Definitely like the thought, and it's not in here, but but being the risk takers to challenge the status quo for education, make it a little bit more fun, do a little bit more something than just handing out pieces of paper, read pieces of paper, but that so it's good. And I'm getting a head shake from our Pinkerton alum here, from Shannon. So I don't know if you have any input to that, Shannon.
Yeah, sometimes it's not always fun to just read something that's given by you, but it's also fun to kind of, like you said, like challenge like what the teacher's saying, or like be able to do something that helps you dig a little deeper into finding a meaning in something.
Yeah. So good. There's a vote in favor there. So nice. Thanks, Shannon. All right, and then the last one, Mr. Giard.
The last goal is outdoor community-based learning. Continue to implement and grow opportunities to establish experiential outdoor community-based learning and evidence-based practices which foster resilience while building a sense of community and connection.
I don't know.
The community-based learning is when you ask, why are we doing what we're doing, so that people in the high school are like, yes, this actually has real world implications. I think teachers should always be able to answer why we're teaching it to the kids. I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah. I think, just like we heard from the summer, there's a lot of good benefits, but also it's impacting and landing on the students to do something different, work on a farm, going into nature, doing, all the great stuff that they did this summer that hope, carries over. So, and I know Megan's a big fan of this also. So looking forward to, supporting this and continuing to grow this year over year. So thank you. All right. So we won't take a vote on this tonight. We'll wait for Ms. Pellegrini to do her wordsmithing and bring this to the next board meeting to finalize that one goal. Any other comments on the goals right now? All right. We are going to move over to board comments and correspondence. Dr. Hubner?
I just wanted to say that Jim Rand has come in to participate in the democratic process, who taught me as a social studies teacher when I was a kid and inspired me. So I appreciate you coming out and participating and helping us. And thank you for all the things that you did for me. So it's much appreciated.
Yesterday, Mr. Mackey and I attended the second Energy Committee meeting. We took a tour of the fire station, gave some recommendations over there. We're going to be typing up some minutes and sending them off to the fire station just for some ideas. Nothing concrete, nothing that they're being forced to do or we're saying that they have to do, but just some ideas and some ways that they could potentially save some resources.
Oh, that's great. I think mine only is, let's say there was, soccer game. It was great to see the soccer team win the last few games. Yesterday was not a win, but so been to a few of the games. We did have a correspondence yesterday, which I appreciated. We had a community member bring up about the opioid pandemic and some of the things that are going on in the community and raise awareness to some things and questioned. And I appreciated Mr. Thompson's response immediately was to look into this and see how we can support and be prepared in case anything was to ever happen. God forbid, knock on wood, that it doesn't. But so I appreciate Mr. Thompson's response on that. That's pretty much what I have.
I don't have anything either.
Okay. That wraps up the board comments correspondence. Consent agenda. Mr. Thompson.
Okay, there is no personnel report, but we could go into the superintendent's report, and I will start by having the directors do a brief update. Why don't we start with Mrs. Tomaselli?
Hello, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give you a quick update. We are, as you've heard already this evening, we are underway with our fall benchmarking for iReady testing. New this year, our kindergartners will be taking the test the week after the Columbus Day holiday. And I just want to emphasize that testing is a piece of our work. It is, whenever we meet for the MTSS implementation meetings, or what we're currently calling RTI meetings, it is a piece of the puzzle, and we are continually triangulating the data. So this is a very important fall benchmark to help us figure out what our students kind of need to know next and create small groups for targeted instruction. But it is certainly not the only piece of information we're looking at. But our teachers, and I have to give credit to the students because they're working very diligently on these tests, and they're doing great with it. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I met with our science department head at the central school to start planning for our Need to Get Outside field trips, which is the grant we got last spring. So I'm in touch with Pinkerton. We're going to be visiting the Forsyth Forest and the property off Shenito Road to do some pond skimming in the fall, and then maple sugaring in the spring. And I think we're going to land in 3rd and 4th grade. There are a few different ways we could put these field trips out there, but we really want to do something special for 3rd and 4th grade because they have missed quite a few opportunities due to COVID in the past few years. Regarding outdoor learning, there's just this past week, the middle school did a very nice event for World Peace Day, and it's not what you might typically think of nature and gardening, but it is. There were a lot of outdoor components to that celebration. They had windmills that are still out in the lawn. They had a chalk for peace movement. So when I think about experiential and outdoor learning, I think of anything that's a dynamic classroom setting, gets them out of the the boxed walls and working together in unique spaces. So the 8th grade team kind of collaborated for their RTI groups and did a really nice job with that. We also have 2 weather stations, one at each school. We have an allocated staff member that is trained and schooled on how to use those weather stations and is going to be offering PD to the other colleagues. So I'm looking forward to seeing that live data be integrated into some lessons in the next few months. We also have a 7th grade special event coming, and I'm a little hesitant to talk about it, but Lori Lynn Griffin has something special planned for one of her science units that will pertain to 7th grade families, and we might be able to open it up to a wider population once we get more details worked out. And along the lines of community partnership, I just wanted to remind everyone that the St. Anne's Pantry is doing their first Victory Garden dinner of the fall on Friday night. It is free of charge. It's from 6:30 to 9 on the town green. They are asking for donations. They are going to be trying to put them towards building a small greenhouse. So the ongoing partnership with St. Anne's Garden, we started a little bit this past spring, and next summer we're hoping to do more gardening together, but that's a partnership we really want to support. So if you're interested, the RSVPs are due this evening. Both principals sent out mailers earlier in the week with that information. And then finally, we have Play for a Cure is happening October 6th. That's another big kind of community partnership event that we host here at the school. The kids will be wearing pink and purchasing pink paraphernalia everywhere. And it's a tremendous fundraiser for cancer awareness.
That's awesome.
Any questions?
No, great update. Thank you.
Right. Actually, turn it over to Jess, who's going to talk a little bit about the submission of the MTSS grant.
Good evening again. We're very excited to announce that last Friday at like 4:05, I think, we submitted a grant proposal to the Office of Student Wellness at the DOE for what they call a Promising Futures grant. And the grant was really about creating a more robust MTSS process and system within your school, and really focused on the social, emotional, and behavioral well-being of students. And with that also had a focus because the federal funding was coming from an agency that supports students in the prevention of substance misuse or abuse. And so one of the categories in which the grant activity areas had to be was around promoting the not using substances or substance misuse. And so what we did is we created a district-wide plan that included professional development, access to trainings, and essentially we are hoping to receive a $25,000 reward to support our basically implementation of our MTSS system around sort of the behavioral side.
That's awesome.
Any questions on that? And they did that in collaboration with Nicole. And really what we really want to make sure that we're doing is we're collaborating between curriculum and student services to ensure that students are getting what they need from not only from sort of the instructional side, but also from the social emotional side, because even though she is focused on curriculum, it is around the whole student. And so we're really trying to create that sort of focus in our work together.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any questions about that? Yeah.
Do we have any idea as to how many districts apply to these grants? But I mean, I know there's so many grants, but is that information available?
I don't know how many districts applied. I could probably ask. I do know that when we were at the SEL conference last week, the two of the Department of Ed wellness sort of consultants were there who are reviewing the grant. And so I asked some very pointed questions to them around, hey, what are some activities we can put in there to ensure that potentially we would maybe get the award. And so they helped us navigate sort of how we needed to structure our grant process. So I don't know how many, but I do know that she provided us some really good information around what were some of the areas, if we focused on that we would have a good chance of getting that grant. And stay tuned, October 14th, we should be receiving an announcement regarding whether or not we receive that grant. And I think we're going to continue to look for grants around the MTSS process because it is something that is essentially coming down as not only a federal but a state requirement. So there's going to continue to be more grant funding out there for us to access because they really want to make sure that schools are really moving forward with this process. Because essentially, for lack of a better sort of way to explain it, it's RTI sort of like on steroids, right? So it's really making our RTI process better because it is encompassing more than just the interventions, but it's looking at it from a systematic approach with your district.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So, received some information from Pinkerton today on their costs for the 22 school year, and it looks like their costs are about just a little over $14,088 for your regular education students. There are a number of other programs that they have as well, and we are looking at a refund, a rebate, if you will, almost like a return of surplus that we would normally receive, like if we overpay for our insurance. The difference between the actual and the billed tuition fee results in a credit due to Hsd from Pinkerton Academy in the amount of $12,773, equivalent to about almost one student's tuition. So they continue to deliver very good value. Total student population, 2,995 as of the last school year. So some good news there. I also have and will distribute for you to be able to peruse. I think you'd ask for some of our actual data with some benchmarks for prior years and some analysis. So I have that, and I'll distribute that for you to take a look at over the course of the next couple of weeks. So
Thank you, Mr. Dowd.
thank you.
Last week, the 20th and 21st, we were able to send a team of 12 of our educators to the Best Practices in Social Emotional Learning Conference in Concord that's sponsored by the New Hampshire School Administrators Association. We brought a very diverse group of educators, and this was 2 days of keynote speakers, breakout sessions focused on mental health, wellness of both students and educators as well. They talked about student discipline. There were strands that were focused on MTSS. I was able to participate in the conference, and I really have to take a minute to thank our educators who participated in these 2 days. It's really difficult to actually take time away from your building or your classroom. And I think what I appreciated the most was, sitting at a large round table with, district administrators, building administrators, counselors, teachers. We even sat with our colleagues from the Concord School District and just taking time, even at lunch, to talk about the needs of our students and have really robust conversations about social emotional learning, mental health, and well-being. This professional development really helps our educators and our leaders improve their practice when they come back to the building. So it was certainly time well spent. Looking ahead as we talk about professional development, tomorrow we have our first of approximately 7 early release days. We appreciate parents' patience and flexibility with the change of schedule. But as I have said before, our professional development of our staff really has to be a priority in ensuring that we are participating in our mandatory trainings, curriculum development, collaboration time. Tomorrow, our educators will continue a training they started in the summer. It's called ALICE. It is a research-based response to active shooter and active threats in the school. That will result, when we do complete that training, in a certification for our schools. And that training is partially done online through modules. And then there's a practical piece that is taught by our school resource officer. So just so folks are aware that the mild inconvenience of having to adjust your schedule to pick your child up is offset by the need to receive really high quality professional development, and we appreciate everyone's patience with that as well. Also, while we're on the theme of professional development, these last 2 days, as Jess had indicated, our building administrators, both our principals and our assistant principals, participated in what we call an LEA training for special education. Again, this is a certification that they will receive. And really what that does is it allows them to appropriately facilitate a special education meeting to ensure that our students are getting the services that they need while also managing the resources of the district. And I have to tell you, my favorite part over the last 2 days of this training was Mrs. Tomaselli got to play substitute principal at the central school, and I got to play substitute principal at the middle school. So we were getting back to our roots. And assistant, yeah, all in one. So well worth it. Again, professional development is really important. When we talk about improving outcomes for students, well, we need to make sure that we're providing professional development for our staff, including our school leaders as well. And lastly, I know Nicole mentioned it, but Play for the Cure, October 6th. We'd love to have as many parents and community members here at the middle school. And again, that's to raise money to prevent, treat, and cure cancer. And, Hsd does not have a trademark on Play for the Cure. It is a program that occurs throughout several schools throughout the country. But there's one thing different that I've noticed about Play for the Cure here. It's the spirit. To see hundreds, without exaggeration, hundreds of people showing up emblazed in their pink and buying raffle tickets and having snacks and cheering on their local team. It is unlike anything that I have ever seen. I showed up last year and I was absolutely blown away. So I'd encourage you to just give some consideration. Come on over on October 6th. I promise you will not be disappointed. And that's our superintendent report. And if there's any questions, we'll happily entertain them.
Questions? Oh, I remember last year you telling me you were floored at what happened here that day. So
yeah,
maybe this year even more floored.
Exactly.
So, all right. If there's no other questions under other business, old business, I don't have anything unless anybody else does. And we're not going to a non-public, so we will adjourn approximately 12 minutes early at 8:28 p.m. Thank you very much.